During World War II, Lieutenant Colonel Matt Urban served as a military leader in the US Army. He was well known for his bravery and leadership skills, however, he struggled with a sense of purpose in his personal life. Then, one day, everything would change. This man was assigned to lead a battalion during the Battle of Normandy, and upon seeing the sacrifices and hardships of his fellow soldiers, Lieutenant Colonel Matt Urban was struck by a new feeling. This feeling was a deep sense of responsibility for the well-being of the soldiers. Instead of commanding the battalion from a safer position in the back, he decided to risk his own life and lead from the front. He also personally tended to the wounded and made sure that his soldiers had the supplies and resources they needed. The events of World War II changed Lieutenant Colonel Matt Urban forever, but they seemed to change him for the better. After the war, this man continued his service in the military and had a successful career in public service. He cared for veterans and inspired many others because of his actions during and after the war. His story illustrates how a man faced with responsibility can become someone great, someone worthy to be called a strong man. Unfortunately, we don't hear many new stories of men becoming strong and filled with purpose nowadays. Modern comforts like online dating, junk food, porn, video games, and drugs seem to have inhibited the souls of today's young men to go out there and seek a sense of meaning, resulting in them wandering through life aimlessly. This aimlessness can be extremely damaging to men, especially young men, who are naturally built to find and fulfill their purpose. So with this video, I want to look at the reasons why so many young men are seemingly lost in this modern world and to figure out if there are some practical ways one can find what he's looking for. If we look at many famous stories of men rising up against all odds, amongst those great men, we usually see one thing in common: responsibility. That's exactly what is lacking in young men nowadays. The sense of responsibility is an essential part of a man's life, and if a man loses responsibilities, it can result in a life that is meaningless. We can see most young men nowadays locking themselves in their rooms, consuming porn, junk food, movies, TV shows, and playing video games. This extreme comfort state is devoid of responsibility and in turn, void of meaning. We all know that feeling of emptiness, that feeling of being useless, yet we tend to keep escaping into modern comfort, especially into video games. But why? Well, video games naturally appeal to men as they are not passive like watching a movie, but they engage you in simulated responsibility. When you are leveling up, building your character, defeating enemies, and getting rewards, that's all simulated illusion of responsibility. If you really love playing video games, this means that you have a great potential to live a great life, as your mind and body are screaming for meaning. But engaging in video games only comforts your desire in the short term. I think if you engage in a lot of this modern pleasure nowadays, you know that it's not real and want to escape this lifestyle of escapism and this aimlessness. Another reason why so many young men feel lost nowadays is the type of help they are able to receive. When we experience life problems, our first instinct is to recommend going to a therapist, even if we haven't been to one ourselves. This very surface piece of advice makes men seek therapy, which can be extremely beneficial when it works, but in some cases provides very little benefit, as for a man, the need for purpose and responsibility is higher than his need to just be listened to and told to accept himself.
The brain scans show us that the male brain goes backwards to observe and then forwards to act upon it. It mostly goes like this: back, observe, forward, act. When we see a problem, we act upon that problem. That's how the male brain tends to work. When you have a therapy model that just makes men feel heard and loved, okay, they kind of feel heard, I feel heard. And they kind of feel loved, well, I kind of feel loved. Now I feel like a useless piece of helpless garbage that other people are sitting here loving. That means they just pity me, and I am just an endless creature of pity who will never solve any problems. It almost makes them worse. Men need to deal with pain by finding a way through it and finding a purpose through it so that they can push through that pain, push through the pain receptors, push through that and follow that mission. If you do that, men can go through the pain and put it in its place because they no longer feel helpless against the pain. There is a reason for enduring the pain. That's what men need.
This is not to say that you shouldn't go to a psychologist if you think you have a serious problem, as a psychologist can be a great help in terms of assessing your situation individually. However, you should actively be looking for practical ways to deal with your problems. Sometimes the solution is simple, yet the execution is hard. Also, what about when you jump on Instagram or TikTok or whatever social media you consume and you see all of these people living their best lives? Especially the hyper successful influencer, entrepreneurial type men driving around in expensive cars, getting all these beautiful women, owning beautiful homes, multiple businesses, and so on. Although it's important to have role models for men, comparing yourself daily to all of these different guys is also not a solution. It can come to a point that, blinded by the apparent rewards of their lifestyles, you begin to also crave that for yourself and think their way of doing things is right. When in reality, you have to develop your own specific purpose and responsibility instead of trying to emulate someone who you may not actually want to become. So how do you become someone you not only want to be, but also need to be? How do you find yourself? As Nietzsche famously said, he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. So it's time for you to either develop meaning or rekindle your sense of purpose if you have lost it. From the story in the beginning, you can see where the meaning you have so much for lies: in responsibility. This means, firstly, responsibility for yourself. When I hit rock bottom in my life and decided to turn things around, I knew I needed to make some major changes. Primarily, the biggest change that I needed to make was to start putting effort into my life instead of all this effort I was putting into video games. I actually asked myself this question: what would my life look like if I put 16 hours a day into goals and dreams I had instead of 16 hours a day into video games? And I was curious if I was actually successful at this, if I was able to achieve these goals and dreams, which at the time I didn't really know what those were, but I was curious to start setting some and seeing where I could go. If I was actually successful at it, then I might as well start today, because then I can give myself as much time as possible to actually see just how far I could go. Now, I was in my early 20s when this happened, and I'm 34 years old today. And I'm blown away at how far I've been able to go. But I know that if I did not start that day, if I did not commit to putting effort into my life and pursuing new goals and new dreams I had and working on my own self-improvement, I would have never got to where I am today. So you have to start today, and you have to start putting effort into your life proactively. Nobody's gonna come and save you. You have to be the person to save yourself. So if you're ready to turn your life around, begin by taking care of your body in terms of hygiene, brushing your teeth every day, making your bed, and bringing order to your surroundings. You need to get organized. Then you want to start exercising and eating healthy regularly.
That competitive nature inside of a young man is still alive, but it's just being used on the wrong things. For me, the absolute best thing that someone like in my shoes could have done, and it was something I actually quite liked doing from a young age anyway. I like the idea of the gym. It's a gym because video games are numbers driven. You know, you look at the numbers, they're going up and you're like, dopamine, you know, awesome. The gym's the same. If you go about the gym in the correct way, you have a routine, you have your numbers which you're tracking, you know. You can say, last session, I did a 50 kg bench press for 12 reps. You have the numbers there. There's that competitive edge. And you're like, okay, I did 12 last time. I'm going to do 13 this time. And the benefits are immediately tangible because the sense of achievement you get after you've had a good gym session, you feel it immediately. Much like how you do with video games. If you get a 7 kill streak on COD, you get that sort of dopamine straight away, like, oh, I get to call in my Harrier strike now. You get a sense of achievement immediate with the gym. I think the gym is an absolutely incredible start point for people who are much addicted to video games, because that's where I started.
Also, don't neglect your mind and try to learn and build skills around the goal that you have. For me, initially, that was improving my social skills, then having my own business and traveling around the world. Your goal can be anything that inspires you or something that makes you feel and be useful to others. Volunteering is also a great option to start. Video games, porn, and all these comforts should not be the reasons you get up in the morning. You need to strive towards some sort of goal. As the famous writer Robert Greene says, our childhood can actually tell a lot about who we might want to become. So think about hobbies and things that you worked on as a kid.
What you want are little details, little signs that reveal something essential. And I ask people to kind of dig inside themselves and to find little stories when you were a child of those particular moments that will reveal some kind of excitement that you had in relation to something that might seem trivial.
Because that can be an indication of your goal. For me, music would be a great example of that. Once you decide to take responsibility for yourself, you can look for ways to take responsibility for the people and the community around you. In the past, men used to be providers for the tribe, and that natural sense of responsibility for the group was what made men strong and full of purpose. Nowadays, we have men with little to no identity and no care for themselves or others. We feel useless, and that leads to a lot of self-contempt. If you've been only about yourself for a long time, this can be difficult, but I urge you to try this simple technique to begin learning to care about others. Do something nice once per day for a person without expecting anything in return. I know this saying is as old as time, but it really does work, as perhaps at first you will just do it to get out of your comfort zone. But soon you'll realize that this simple exercise becomes your lifestyle, and this new addition of helping people in your life gives a new sense of purpose. So responsibility for yourself and others is key in order to finding yourself in this chaotic modern world. Meaninglessness is part of why so many young men are lost nowadays, but that is not the only element. What about why men are so lonely in today's society? If you want an answer to that, then check out this video.